Mike McElroy. I'm currently the mayor of Decatur. I spent my formative years at Decatur and left and went to work over in Danville for a number of years and came back in 1988. Went to work for Sept Distributing Company, the Anheuser-Busch distributor. Got involved with the city council. I was on that for 6 years, and I've been the mayor for 4. I would say Senator Bob McCarthy was our neighbor when they redistricted, and that's a lot of years ago. And I got a chance to come over several times with he and his son Doug and see the Capitol. And there was something about the Capitol that just really stuck to me. And I like the politics. I got involved at local levels in Danville and in Decatur. And when this opportunity with Senator McCann, when he left that district and it was open, I got some telephone calls about it. I looked into it and I thought, this is the right time. If I'm going to do it, now is when I want to do it. So that ultimately is where we are today. It's been a wonderful experience and one I don't regret.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks for having me this morning. I'm running because, quite simply, I want to solve problems. That's why I chose to run. That's why, ultimately, we put together a campaign that's very active in all 6 counties of the 48th District. I was first elected to local office when I was 21 years old. I was elected to the city council in my hometown, which is Bunker Hill in southern Macoupin County. I ran because I had one issue, which was I wanted to fix sidewalks. I had a neighbor who had a complaint about sidewalks, and I thought the city government wasn't acting fast enough. So I thought I'm going to put my effort into getting something done on the city council, which I did for a term, and I ran for mayor. And I beat a longtime incumbent, and incidentally, he and I are very good friends today. I served nearly a term there, and then I chose to take that same type of approach of solving problems to the county board in Macoupin County. We had an unsustainable budget crisis in 2004 when the economy was doing quite well. The county government was spending money hands over fist, and we were running record deficits at a time when revenues were coming in at a record pace as well. So it was upside down, and I saw it as unsustainable. So I went to the county board to solve that budget crisis. And that was the first of several budget issues that we had to deal with over the course of my 8 years on county government. But in short, that's why I'm running for this office, is because I see that same type of approach as what's needed right now in the legislature.
Guys, one of the biggest issues out there is the pension debt that the state has incurred. There are a number of plans out there to try to solve that. Is there one that you prefer, or do you have your own plan for dealing with that problem? I'll start with Andy, since Mike went first last time.
I don't. I'm not going to point to one that I would prefer, but what I would prefer is a honest and earnest discussion among all parties. I don't think that's happening to the degree that it needs to right now. I think there's a lot of bad blood between the unions that represent state employees and between Governor Quinn and the legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle. I think there's some politics involved in this discussion. It would be good if those politics were removed from the discussion and people sat at the table and actually had a discussion about what we're trying to accomplish here. And ultimately what's trying to be accomplished is protecting pension obligations and things that are protected by the Constitution, at the same time balancing the state budget and paying off debt. And I think, my approach in county government, I've negotiated many contracts with unions that represent county employees, and I've been across the table where you ask people to pay more for health insurance. I asked the union just last year to double their health insurance contribution. That wasn't easy for them to do, but ultimately we came to an agreement to where that happened, and that helped us balance our budget. So that started with us sitting across the table from each other for hours and hours and hours, and having an honest discussion and putting effort into it. And I think that's what needs to happen here.
One of the plans favored by your former boss, the Senate President and the Speaker, it would move, gradually shift the costs of pensions from the state of Illinois to the school districts. What do you think of that? Do you favor that?
Well, I'm not opposed. I'm opposed to that idea in today's construct, in today's environment of school funding. I'm not opposed to the idea of local school districts having a greater stake in the cost of TRS in this case, but I am opposed to doing it now because we have such a disparity gap between districts that have resources and districts that don't, and I see that move making that gap worse, and that disproportionately affects school districts in the 48th Senate District. And so to me, if there was an effort, whether it's phased in over 10 years or 20 years, or if it's done all in one year, if we're going to talk about local districts picking up that cost, we have to have a bigger conversation about school funding.
Do you favor, Eric Madeir's framework for doing this, an offer and then an acceptance? Is that the right framework? Is that how you get this done constitutionally, do you think?
I think it could be. I go back to what I said earlier. I think it needs to be negotiated. I think there has to be a full process that involves all parties of both, and when I say parties, I don't mean political parties, but, the legislative leadership, the executive branch and unions that represent state employees.
So they need to sit down at the table with the unions themselves, is that what you're saying, which they really kind of haven't. I don't feel like there's been a negotiation necessarily, or, what do you?
Well, I think, I haven't had anybody in, representing labor unions tell me that they're not willing to sit down and have this conversation. I think the conversation right now is lacking.
Mike, what do you think?
I too believe that there won't be a resolution to this until the courts give a resolution. I also believe that now is not the time to be putting costs on the backs of the schools until this mess is totally straightened out. I think that I can see that from what has happened in Springfield before, that that can be a real bad thing for the taxpayers of the local communities. I also believe that if you don't have, if the unions are not going to be at the table, you might as well not waste your time being at the table. It's not going to happen.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
They need to be very, very involved in what's going on at this particular point, because this is going up every day. Your costs are going up every day. And this is something that the taxpayer of the state of Illinois did not cause. This is something the taxpayer of the state of Illinois is going to be forced to pay. And those contracts were signed, and those amounts of money that they paid, they're saying they were unreasonably high, whatever. Somebody signed them. Somebody said it was okay. Somebody went to work every day thinking that you expect me to do this for this money. And I don't think those people are wrong either. So I think that this is a huge problem that has to be taken care of by the state and the unions.
But there is one plan that's gotten some support already, which is to change the COLAs for retirees. You could at least address that. Do you support or oppose that idea?
Changing the COLAs?
For the retirees.
No, I oppose that idea.
Why?
At this time. I think that people have retired, have worked very hard for their retirements. They are now in retirement, and I don't think that's a time and place to redo it.
How about you, changing the COLAs? Is that the way to go?
No, I oppose, changing the COLAs for retirees. I think there has to be a broader discussion about the cost of what the obligations are in the state budget when it comes to pensions. And I think, picking one proposal out, absent of a larger discussion, is a mistake.
What about changing the COLAs for the people that are in the system now, whether they're in Tier 1 or Tier 2? I mean, Tier 2 already has a lower COLA. What about changing those COLAs for Tier 1? Is it constitutional first, and do you favor it second?
For current employees.
For current employees, yeah.
I'm not a constitutional expert. I'm opposed to that for the same reason. I think it's very difficult to say that you're for or against any individual proposal, that's on the table. I'm not opposed to anybody bringing forward ideas, but to me, there's got to be a bigger discussion that goes back to any changes to the system for retirees and current employees has to be negotiated, which ultimately it also has to be constitutional. Because I do think, maybe we differ on this point, I think that if this ends up in the court system, that means that there's been failure on the part of the legislature and on the part of the governor. And if this ends up in a court system, which it may, but if it does, it's going to waste a lot of time, and it's going to put a lot of unknowns in a situation dealing with the state budget where we already have too many unknowns. And it's going to cost a lot more money for taxpayers, which we don't need right now.
Mike, how about you? COLAs for current state employees, the ones in Tier 1?
That would be something that would be left to be negotiated, I believe. I mean, we've had to make changes in city government with current workers in order to be able to balance the budget, and that's not an easy thing to do. You know, you're going to give some to get some, and you know, I believe that that's the way that has to be handled.
Let's shift to education. You hit on a little bit of the funding differences, big disparity. And assuming that these costs don't get transferred, which would make it worse, what can you do for education in coming years? I mean, we have a lot of meetings in here, and superintendents don't know how to budget, and there's all kinds of issues. What are your thoughts about education moving forward?
I would say that's exactly what I'm finding out as I've traveled around and talked to the superintendents. They don't know exactly how to do it. And you know, what we have to look at is for the best of the school and for the best of the taxpayer. And the school, my bad, I mean the students and the taxpayer. It has to be the same quality type of education. And what are you going to have to cut in order, you know, for the taxpayer? There has to be some give and take on the property taxes on how that money all gets funneled. So it's a very, I think it's an extremely tough decision when you're talking to a superintendent and saying, you know, we're going to have to stop this, this, and this. And maybe it's because, you know, the things that I think about with education isn't just the education, isn't just, it's the experience, it's the people that you meet, it's the activities that you get into. I think by taking away activities, you're taking an incredible part away from growing up. And those are the things that they keep talking about. So it is very, very tough to do that, and it's going to be for the legislators, they're going to have their work cut out for them on that. I truly believe that.
I'll just give you one example of something I would change. We send poverty grant dollars to some of the wealthiest school districts in this state. That was done at a time when the budget was healthier than it is today. Those are the types of things that I think we need to take a look at, especially at a time like we have today where resources are scarce. The worst thing about what is going on with school funding today is that superintendents and school boards, I think they know how to make good decisions. The problem is that the ball keeps moving and the goalpost keeps moving, and they're promised one thing and something else happens 2 weeks before a school year starts. And there's nothing worse in my book than that. And that happens all too often for the past couple of years. So I think we should have a conversation in the legislature about maybe bringing a greater degree of certainty to school funding on any number of levels, whether that means you know, making sure that school boards, as they're planning for the coming calendar year or school year, making sure that the budget is in place sooner when it comes to schools. I think that warrants a discussion. You know, the final general state aid payments always seem to be a question. You know, those things should be removed from the conversation, because I think superintendents and school boards right now, they need that certainty, especially when resources are scarce. And I think that's something that the legislature should do a better job at doing. But you know, I go back to what I mentioned earlier, that we have incredible disparity in this state between districts that have resources, mostly from local property taxes, and districts that don't, that rely heavily on general state aid dollars. And we have to get back to the conversation that was being had for many years in a row. This is not easy, but we have to get back to that conversation, because we have to make sure that schools have resources that they need.
The legislature in 2011 passed an income tax increase to raise the tax from 3% to 5% for individuals, and there was a corresponding increase in the corporate income tax. If you had been in the legislature at that time, would you have voted yes or no on that? We'll start with you, Andy.
I would have voted no.
How come?
Because I think there could have been more that was done on the cut side before the conversation began on the revenue side. When we lost 20 cents on every dollar of our revenue in Macoupin County, when we lost 2 coal mines, the first calls to deal with the crisis were get rid of the property tax cap. That was the first thing. We had a 5-minute discussion in our board meeting, and I told the board, we're not going to talk about this anymore. Then there was a call to raise the sales tax for public safety. And we had about a 5-minute discussion about that in our county board meeting. I said, we're not going to talk about this anymore. So we took a difficult route, and we made major reductions to our budget in Macoupin County, and we didn't cut services, and we didn't lay people off, and we spend less money than we did 10 years ago today, and I'm proud of that. And we didn't do it because for any other reason than people kind of shed themselves of their party label, and they decided we're going to work together and we're going to take this more difficult route, and that's what we did. That's what I would have liked to have seen happen.
Some people will no doubt point out that you were chief of staff to Senate President Cullerton at that point. How come within that office and with that power that you probably had to influence what he was doing, or to suggest things to him at least, how come you didn't do more to say we need to cut more before we even consider this?
Well, I wouldn't presume, Gert, that I didn't. I mean, I didn't vote. I've yet to take a vote in the legislature. Despite what my opposition in the race says, I have no voting record in the legislature. My voting record is in Carlinville, and I'm very proud of it. And it is in stark contrast in many cases to action that the legislature has taken on any number of issues. But that's the record I'm responsible for, and that's the record that I'm running on, because those are choices I made, not choices someone else made.
Mike, what do you think?
I would have voted no. And the remarks that he thinks his opposition makes are, in fact, true, and I stand by him. He has had a place at the table for 10 years about what's going on with the finances of the state of Illinois. You can't walk away from that. The jobs that he's held, can't walk away from that. There is a responsibility. I don't own the company where I work, but I have a responsibility to give my best thoughts, give my best efforts for the company, and I won't. I don't turn away from any decision that the company makes. I still stay with it, because that's my job. That's where I am, and that's what he does. And I would have definitely voted against it. And as a matter of fact, one of the things when we get to Senate is the first thing we're going to try to do is to repeal it. That did more to kill small businesses in this state than anything has.
So I take it, the next General Assembly is going to have to address the tax issue again, then you would both vote against it when it's up?
I certainly would, yes.
Right now I would, yes.
And, okay, but the tax produces almost $7 billion in revenue.
Where is it today, though?
Well, where are you going to find
It's going to the pension system to Medicaid.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how do you balance that budget without $7 billion or whatever the tax will bring in the year that you guys repeal it?
Well, the biggest thing that we got to look at is, excuse me, there's anything that goes into a budget, there's all kinds of things that can be cut, all kinds of it. You've got, I'm just going to throw out, you got entitlement dollars. You have, don't tell me that there's not too many employees in the state of Illinois. When we found out in Decatur, Illinois, we had 26 too many. And we really didn't realize it till we had to get down and start cutting. People retired, and we waited and we didn't replace them, and they go, oh, wait a minute, we can still get the job done. That's what it's all about, is still getting the job done. Sometimes you got to work a little harder. Sometimes you got to work a little smarter. And those are the things that you've got to do when you're in leadership. And I would say now $7 billion, you're exactly right. That's a huge sum. But if you just start bringing back industries that we lost. For instance, I'll use the trucking industry because we have a guy in Decatur by the name of McElroy who has a trucking company that at least once a week somebody from Indiana is calling them to come over there. Now, this is not anything to do with my opponent. These are things that happened that the state of Illinois did, and I understand that the legislature voted. But the taxes, the license fees on these things are just to the point where I'm just tickled to death that he still stays. If he wasn't so close to ADM and Tate and Lyle, I'm sure he wouldn't. But we have taken places and gone to industries and have made it impossible to do work in Illinois. And we've got to turn that around. More people, more jobs creates more dollars, and that's what we got to do.
So you think there needs to be layoffs within the state of Illinois to
I think that's certainly one of the things that I would be looking at. I mean, you just as big as the government is, you can't tell me that there's not some waste there. And the most expensive thing you have at AV business, it's people. That's the most expensive part of doing business is your people, and you can't do it without them. By the way, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute, but you sure need to have a very accurate head count, I believe, to show the taxpayer that you are in fact looking out for their dollars.
Andy, how do you close the 7? If you don't have the income tax, how do you deal with the 6 or 7 billion, which is the revenue that you would lose?
Well, I think you have to decide what's affordable and what isn't. I think there's waste in state government. I think I would describe a greater part of what the state budget spends money on is what are our priorities. I think there were some gains toward reforming some things in the past session. Medicaid reform would be one of those. There was an effort there that was a bipartisan effort. Probably didn't go as far as some people asked or some people demanded, but it certainly was an effort that people came together and made some gains in terms of preserving the system and making sure that it's there for folks that need it, but saving in terms of costs. That's a good example of other things that I think can happen.
You've been involved in crafting these budgets, though. I mean, is there like 1 or 2 or 3 examples you can give us where you would save, a big chunk of money, maybe $1 billion? Is there something out there that you would have in mind?
Well, there's some things like we can consolidate the 2 offices of comptroller and treasurer.
But that's stopping that, right? I mean, the speaker won't call that bill.
Then that I'm not the speaker.
Right.
I'd love to sponsor the bill. I'd love to work to see that it is passed. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that don't want to see that bill passed, or any bill, any reduction, anything that changes the status quo is always going to have somebody who opposes it. But I think those are the types of things that have to start and they have to continue. I think the legislature needs to take a look at how budgets are crafted. I think this once a year, it happens once a session. A budget's adopted in May, and the executive branch manages it, and then the legislature comes back, and there's problems that have to be fixed that build up over the course of a year, and some of them are at times very difficult to overcome. So I think there's got to be a management effort on the part of the administration and on the part of the legislature to make sure that when revenues are down, you got to curb spending. If revenues are up, and then maybe you can go back to that list of stuff that you've been putting off for many years and spend some money on it, if it makes sense. That's what, I go back to my experience in Macoupin County. That's what I did there. It wasn't, when we said we can't afford the ECHO pension plan anymore, that didn't make me any friends among county officials. But that we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on one pension plan for elected officials. So we voted to end it.
Do you think state government's too big? Do we need to lay off state workers in order to get there?
No, I don't. I don't accept the premise that the only way to do this is on the backs of employees of state government. We spent about more than half. It was about 60% of our budget in the county on people and personnel. There were positions where people retired, and we didn't fill them. That was a savings to us. But we didn't lay people off. That was a goal of ours. A goal of ours was to balance the budget without adding to unemployment in our county that spiked when we lost 2 coal mines.
I got more if someone else does.
Well, no, I was just going to, the two biggest components of the budget anymore are Medicaid and education. And we just did Medicaid, and our paper just ran a series of stories showing the human impact of those cuts, which I would guess makes it somewhat unlikely that we're going to have another round of deep cuts in Medicaid. Do you go after education then? Is that outside of poverty grants that are going to wealthier school districts, which I don't know what the number is. I doubt it's that significant. But is education in for, as the governor likes to call it, a haircut at this point?
Without having everyday knowledge of what goes on there, I would certainly think that should be, as virtually everything else should be, on the table to look at. You know, a cut here, a cut there. You know, all of a sudden you're talking about some real money, and I think I think it's time for a full overhaul on all the dollars that are being spent by state agencies.
Maybe.
I think we need to spend our education money better. I think we need to spend it smarter. I think we need to drive it to places where we can have real achievement and gains and outcomes. I think that can be done with what we spend today.
Chris wrote an editorial in the last week or so about county juvenile detention facility. And what was the number
Basically, the upshot was they couldn't afford to house girls in the facility anymore, and they couldn't take, they're not inmates, but they couldn't take troubled children from other counties anymore because it was too expensive.
Right.
Because the state had cut their funding to the point where they couldn't. But
and
that was the
the
upshot.
cuts have been really significant, right?
Sure.
I mean, from whatever to cut 70%. Was that
I'm not sure what percentage, but it was high. It was a chunk of change.
Those kind of cuts are already taking place, and granted, those aren't the kind of education and Medicaid. But I guess my concern is, it's like, I mean, there is an impact to those cuts at some point, you know, and what is the role of the state in providing those kind of services for youngsters? So.
Well, I've lived through those cuts on the local end in Macoupin County, and they've been numerous on any number of fronts and any number of offices that we administer in county government, and it's constant. Our approach is manage our way through the problem, which we've done. So there is a human impact to whether it's the juvenile detention center or whether it's things like probation services that the county provides through funds from the state on the local level. So we've taken the approach of we're going to manage our way through these problems, and we're not going to reduce services people expect from county government, regardless of what the state of Illinois does to us as a county government. And that's what we've done. Because, when you cut probation services, you see an increase in spending on the other side of the equation, which ends up costing the state ultimately and our, for a short period of time, the county government through our jail facility more money. So we would be naive to think that by reducing, adult treatment and the correctional system doesn't have some, not just human impact, but budgetary impact to the state for many years to come. So that's, when I use the word management, I mean it. I mean, we got to manage our way through this issue, and we can't make foolish reductions that end up costing state taxpayers more money at the end of the day.
Well, when you talk about a system of youth, for Macoupin County as opposed to Macon County, you're talking about big dollars. And, excuse me, and we hold that through the Sheriff's Department. Of course, the county's part of the city, of the taxes. And we have had to lay off. We've had to close down parts of the cell area and gone to Champaign and rented, be able to do it. We continue to do it. If anybody thinks that problem is going to go away, then it's going to be another way they have to handle them. And they're, because that's the only thing it's going to do. It's an unfortunate fact. where we are today it's very scary to me. We do indicator the second meeting of every month in summer. We go to a neighborhood, and I'll tell you, I've done that for 5 or 6 years and gone to virtually all of them, and I can tell you that it's scary. In the 6 years, these kids have their habits, the things they like have gotten much more dangerous, and it's very, very scary. I worry about people living in the neighborhoods, and what we're trying to do there is we take our housing people in and get the if we can help somewhere or get somebody to do things. We've gotten some contractors that'll come for the worst of the elderly. We got to do that. That's what you got to do when you're life. You have to look to help because you don't have the dollars to do it. But when the state puts down mandates and you can't pay for them, that's where the real rub comes. That's where the real problem is, and that's what we're seeing right now. And I don't really have a good answer for it at all, but we're talking about building another facility. And you know, and I applaud our public school system. I mean, we have people that my wife's been a teacher. This is her 35th and final year. She's in a sixth grade, K to sixth grade, and even in that school, the kids have gotten just tougher and tougher, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, you know, when we talk a little bit going back about teachers' pay, I think they earn their pay. I don't think there's any question about that, and I don't care if they have the summer off or not, because my own observations is my wife spends an incredible amount of time in the summer on the computer putting together lessons plans for the next year. So I don't buy all that, and we've got to come up with something, and I don't know where federal government's involved or whatever, but we have so many mandates on so many things that have to happen that everything has to be just right. There can't be anything like the old days. I mean, you know, God forbid that two of these guys get in a fight and one of them get hurt. I mean, they're not in there because they were helping paint a church. You know, that's not why they're in there. And you know, things are tough, and they should be tough in there. You shouldn't want to go back. And that's one of the things that we really need to look at.
Do you guys favor concealed carry, or as the governor would put it, allowing people to carry loaded concealed handguns on their person? What are your stance on those issues?
I'm a Second Amendment backer.
That's a yes.
It's a yes. That's a yes.
I support it as well.
You know, it appears that gambling may not end up resolved yet this year, so it could linger around in the next session. Where do you stand on the gambling expansion?
My personal view on gaming is I'm not a gambler. I don't particularly like it, but I think there's some value to taking revenue from gaming and putting it into places that need help in the budget, places where reductions have been made, or to put money behind priorities such as education funding, such as construction, capital construction, things of that nature.
So do you support expansion?
For those purposes, I would.
At what level? At what they're talking about now, the 5 new casinos and the slots of racetracks and.
Yeah, I think to me, Doug, the test for this is gaming is happening in Illinois right now, in Chicago, but people participate in the activity, but it's in other states. And so, to me, if we can first recognize that, and then say, this is going on, and we can get these revenues for our own purposes in our own state for our own needs, then I would support it.
I would say I'm one that I don't like to legislate behavior of legal behavior, and in many states it is legal behavior, and so I would say it, and I would agree with Andy on the other parts of why it is something that the state does need to look at because it is a new source of revenue. So, yeah, I mean, but I'm not a gambler. I don't, but I guess, again, if you're old enough to go in and you want to do that, I guess that's, up to you. So,
Are you okay with the amount of expansion they're talking about?
yeah, yes, I would be. Because it does do some good for communities that get it. I mean, there's no question about it. I will use Danville as an example. I mean, they're looking 60, 70 new jobs there is a big deal. I mean, that town has been hit very, very hard over the years. So, yeah, I mean, there is some of that for the communities.
Doug wrote it. I'm sorry, go
I was
ahead.
going to say, what's the experience in a community like that when it comes to addiction? Do they have to come up with resources to?
Well, they've looked at that according to the people that I've talked to, and it's very limited. I mean, I've got friends there that I still go back. My wife is from there, and we talk about the thing. I think that what they're hoping is that they're going to pull from. They don't think that they're building it for the people that live in Danville, quite frankly, because it's just not there anymore. So, and at one time it was a thriving place. When you had General Motors and you had Heister, I mean, it was a very, very well-heeled town, community. They think that, and they're counting on the Indiana and the southern part of Illinois that doesn't have, that would be able to get there in an hour and a half as opposed to 2 or 2.25 hours to go north. So that's kind of what my thought is.
Doug had a story today about the ASME contract negotiations. The governor has apparently asked me to take two. You're smiling, you know.
Sorry, should have a better poker face.
To take the employees down, I think up to 2 pay grades. The number used in the memo that was out there was $10,000 pay cut. What do you got? And what do you guys? And then the other thing that stuck out to me was the state said that our employees are overpaid compared to other employees in the private sector. I want to first ask, is that an appropriate thing for the governor to ask me and the state employees to do? And number 2, are state employees overpaid? Start with you, I guess.
I think a contract is a contract, first of all. I go back to my comments earlier that
This is the new contract too. This is not the current one. This is what he's asking for the second one.
for the second one. I think all of these, the intricacies of a negotiation should be at the table, and it should be between the two parties, in this case, the state and the employees. And I think that should be an earnest discussion. I think the fact that a mediator is, been slow, and whether that's the mediator's fault or one of the two parties' fault is immaterial. The fact is we should get a mediator in and we should move forward. It's the next logical step for a new contract, which I think would be a good thing.
Mike, what do you think?
I certainly don't think that they should make any less than what the public sector is paying. And I would certainly say that the chances of any of those agreeing to take a $10 an hour cut is pretty slim and none. So I don't think that's, I'm sure the governor is just doing his typical thing where he makes things sound so bad that you think you're getting a real deal when he comes up with something else. And but we have had great relationships with ASME and Decatur. I mean, we don't always, each side get what they want, but they have been they're consistent and we're consistent when we stay. So I would say that I don't think that's going to happen, but I wouldn't agree with the governor as that was stated now because I haven't had a chance to read the article.
The sponsor of the civil unions bill from a couple of years ago has said he's going to come back and pursue being an outright marriage bill in the state. How do you feel about that? If it comes up?
I believe marriage is between a man and a woman. So.
What about the current civil unions bill? Would you vote yes on that? It's law of the state right now.
I've had that question asked, and And one of the things I found myself was during this was, there was Bernie asked me, and it got by me, a question. I mean, he's got, what about would you rescind? And I really, again, I don't believe in legislating, or I really, people's behavior is people's behavior. And as long as there's no laws being broken, by the fact that there are a couple that live together, those type of things, I just don't think it's my business, and don't have a personal issue with it either. But I would definitely have an issue of anything other than a man and woman being recognized as a married couple.
Anybody?
I wouldn't vote to repeal the current law on civil unions. I don't think there's any harm being done. That law's been in place now for some time, and I wouldn't vote to repeal the law that was passed.
But gay marriage itself?
Yeah, I think the intent of the civil unions law was to strike a balance between, fighting discrimination and, protecting, religious liberty and religious doctrine of the church. And I think I would have to see the bill. I would have to see the bill that the sponsor has indicated that, he's going to, and others have indicated that they're going to introduce. But I would not vote to repeal the current civil union law.
I got a question. And these are separate questions for each of you. And they're not the nicest questions in the world, but I have to ask them anyway. Andy, it's been reported in Capital Facts that you drew this district. Is that true? And can you speak to the ethics of that?
Well, no, it's not true.
I mean, did you have any role at all in the construction of this map, or where the lines went, or did you make any suggestions? Did you have any input whatsoever?
And not in this district. Not in this district. The question of did I have any role is the answer is I did.
Yeah.
I mean, just as a function of where I worked.
Right.
But as in regards to the specific district, no.
And then my question to you is kind of political, but, the Senate Democrats are likely to be in the majority come November. In fact, the Senate President said he's going to get the supermajority back in it, so I'm interested to see if that happens. But, Andy's been very close, he's close to the Senate President. Wouldn't he offer better representation overall, because he would be a member of the majority party? And wouldn't the district that we're in, wouldn't they benefit more from having a Democrat in that district? How would you respond to people who might think that?
Well, I'm sure there are people who think that way. I don't think that way, but I'm sure there are. I will tell you that my strength lies by the fact that my government, 10 years, with also working in the private sector for over 50 years, owning businesses, signing checks on both sides, was nonpartisan. So when I need to get something done, I don't have a problem in the world going to somebody that's got a good idea. I do not believe that the only good idea comes from a Republican. And when I hear a good idea, I'll walk across the aisle and say, anything I can do to help you on this, I will do it. I don't think that's done at all in Springfield. And if it is, it's sure hidden well. It's about time that it comes back to that. People have to get involved. They have to get engaged and just sit there. I don't believe for 1 minute that anybody thought that one party rule should be a government. And we have that in Illinois. You can't even as a Republican give something on the agenda in the House. Now that's not what anybody thought this should be. So I would say that I would be very proud as a Republican to be able to go in, cross the aisle, work on issues that need to be worked on, and would likewise take any Democrat that would want to cross the aisle and work with me on any issue that I may be involved in. I just think that it's time to happen, and it hasn't been happening, and I think it needs to be.
All right, anybody else have anything?
Can I ask one?
Please do.
Right? The state of Illinois right now has, $83 to $86 billion in pension obligations that are paid. We have $8 billion in backlog of bills. got a $7 billion income tax that is terminating in the future. We've got a prison system that is falling apart, overcrowded. Prisons falling apart while we get rid of new ones. We've got a child welfare system that is enduring huge layoffs and cutbacks in service, while at the same time papers run stories about how DCFS isn't doing its job. Got education that is uncertain what the future is. I guess I'd like to know, what's your big picture vision of what you want to accomplish, given the circumstances and the direction the government seems to be going in? What do you reasonably want to accomplish in your term that will make a true difference to the state of Illinois? I don't care who goes first. It's a big picture question.
Yeah, I would say that the thing that gets me the most is the pensions. The threat of the money going, where the money's going to go for the schools, how the pensions are going to pay, how pensions are going to pay the schools. That is not an issue because my wife's a teacher. That is an issue because it's going to affect everything that happens in the city of Decatur. And it will happen everywhere, not just Decatur, but that's going to be this whole situation about where's the breaking point for a property tax bill? Where does that come? You know, the tax bill in Decatur, the sales tax is what pays for the police and fire pensions. That's it. Excuse me, the sales tax is what pays for like the services for the snow plowing and different things. It is the money that on the home owners that you've got to be looking at. And I still stand wrong. The sales tax is what makes a city go. What you have for the pensions is what you get on the house. What your bill says for the homeowner and your house. That goes directly to the police and fire pensions. So you can't have that. You've got to understand the fact that you have lost 1.2 million or more people in the last 2 years out of Illinois. They have to come back. We've got to get more money. I mean, we have to have something where people are back buying and promoting their communities and their wares. That is one of the big issues that I think that by looking at why people leave, and I'm trying in the middle of it right now, is trying to get something that would shows all the restrictions that you have to get a license or get the ability to work out of a state that surrounds us, and then compare what we have. I think we're going to find out that we put people through way too many hoops in order to start a business. I think that's one of the things that we have to do. Then the other, these other things when you're talking DCFS and the other things, I realize totally. I don't know. I'm not at a point yet where I can say that, but that is certainly one of the issues that I know that we have in all the communities. So I would say right now that one of the things I would think right off the bat would be try to get people back, try to create a condition in the state where you want to stay in Illinois, you want to invest in Illinois.
My general approach has always been you try to solve problems, and you rattled off, tick through a pretty good list of monumental problems that we're faced in the state right now. So to me, we need a problem solver. And, first and foremost, that starts with the state budget, in my mind. And we have to bring some stability to that. We have to. It's clear to me that people in this district don't view the legislature as a place where problems can be solved right now. And, whether that's factual or infactual, it's immaterial. We have to get us back on a path of having accomplishments in this state and bring stability to state government, and then I think we can start to get over the hump with some of these things. If it's difficult to open up a small business, to drive job creation, then we should figure out how to make it easier. If we have a budget crisis, which we do, we should put our heads together and figure out how do we find common ground to make sure that we bring a greater degree of stability to the state budget. Those are things that I've done for any number of years in local government. That's the record I am responsible for, which I'm very proud of. And those are the types of things that I want to try to accomplish in the Senate if I'm elected.
That was kind of a closing statement there, but how about if you both, just a minute or so, if you want to say, just backstop why we should support you.
Well, I think that one of the strongest points I have is my being mayor of Decatur. We have had 4 straight budgets balanced. We have gone from about $500,000 to $5 million in the rainy day fund. I am someone, though, that I do believe my idea of the big picture is jobs. I mean, and I realize that that's what it's going to take. I believe that people have to walk across the aisle, and I have absolutely no problem with that at all. I could care less what anybody is. If they've got an idea or they can help me push an idea, I'm all for it. I'm tickled to death with the district that as it turns out, that I got involved with. They're good people. They know what they want. They don't have any problems telling you what they want. They've been good advisors for me as I've gone along on this journey of this election, and I work pretty hard, and I'm honest, and I take great pride in saying that that if you say, if I'm going to say you're going to do something for you, I'm going to do it, and if I can't do it, I'll call you and tell you why I can't get it done. But I believe that it's time that we get some new people that understand that you have to work, that you have to be nonpartisan in most of this anymore. The party system, there's a place for it. There's no question about that. But when it's on the floor and you've got incredibly huge problems like are in the Senate and the House every day, you need to start thinking as a team, not as a party.
Thanks for the opportunity to meet everybody and address everyone today. I think we have plenty of problems to solve, which we've talked about today. I go back to my record in Macoupin County, and not only do I believe that partisanship rarely solves a problem, but my actions as board chairman have proven that I believe it. We pass bipartisan budgets every year. Every single year, we pass bipartisan budgets. I have Republican committee chairs in Macoupin County. That sent some people into orbit on the Democratic side of the aisle, but I believe that if people have good ideas and they're the best person for the job, they should be given the opportunity to do that job. And that's my record. Those are things that I did. We spend less money today, as I mentioned before, in Macoupin County than we did 10 years ago. We didn't do that by cutting services in county government. We did it by managing our budget, making county government as efficient as possible, simple things that over the course of time had added up to big savings to county taxpayers. That is my record. I welcome scrutiny of my record. What I don't welcome is a campaign based on fictitious things about what may or may not happen in the future in regards to my candidacy. That to me is a trivial matter that doesn't get us closer to solving problems. And I think that in this campaign is indicative of some of the larger problems we face in this state today. We should have honest conversations about how are we going to come to common ground to solve the things that we're faced with. And running campaigns based on who may or may not control someone isn't going to get us any closer to that. That actually adds to the partisanship. It doesn't add to the bipartisanship that we need desperately in the legislature. So that's how we're going to run our campaign. I'm very proud of my record in Macoupin County, and I would invite anybody to take a look at it. And again, thank you for having me here today.